Yes, hello everybody. Welcome back. Podcast and chill.
The best podcast you've never heard about.
Until now. Welcome back. My amazing co-host, Christopher Bernard.
Oh, and the always inspirational Neil Quinto. How you doing, buddy?
Good. I'm doing great, man. Good to see you. Great to see you. Unfortunately, not in person, but I love this setup. It's helped us to grow. We're doing video now and the podcast. We're releasing stuff almost every day.
Evolving.
I'm hyped. I'm hyped up. This is going to be a great show.
Always looking fresh, too.
Thank you. Well, because I'm ready to go back.
Yeah, I know. I feel like they're going to announce it, and you're ready. Like, I'm there. You're like, I am there. I got my hair. I look good. I'm ready to go.
I've adopted the mentality that if you totally put everything aside, did nothing to prepare for the going back, it's like a professional team that didn't warm up. You don't start playing the game right away and use the game to warm up, right? You got to be on attack mode right when you get back, and I'm just trying to stay sharp for whenever that is. And I feel like people are I think I mentioned this a couple of weeks ago. People are going to get antsy, and unfortunately, we're going to sacrifice the possibility of contracting coronavirus.
Mm-hmm.
That's going to go to the wayside, and the economy, the well-being of businesses and society, that kind of thing, the fear of debt creeping up, and so on, is going to trump, no pun intended, the decision to keep people at bay, right? And we've seen, actually, there's a number of states that are going back. Trump had a dispute with the governor of Georgia. So I do understand Texas is going back, North Carolina I've seen, I believe West Virginia, namely, a lot of them, California even. And if you look for it, you'll find it. If you look online for videos, stats, what have you, to support that the models were overly stated, the numbers are healthier and better than anticipated, people are going to use that as motivation, and they're going to validate reasons to go back.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you feel it? What are you thinking?
Obviously
there's cautiousness still.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, I still firmly believe there is a virus out there. There's a virus there. We have virus season. I said that before, and so yes, there is a virus out there. How that interacts with humanity at large, I think, isn't fully understood, just because of the conflicting information that is out there.
Right.
And both sides, return. They want to return the normal, and others are like, no, wait for the second, third wave, what have you. There's information to support both sides of that, and I think it's tough. It is tough to go, okay, well, what do I listen to, right?
Yeah, exactly. You have to decipher through everything, and it can get touchy. It's like politics. If you don't strike the right chord, or you don't have the same alignment in thinking, some people get truly offended.
Yeah.
And that's already kind of preconditioned. Oh, you want to go? Oh, you're going to spread it. You don't care. You're malicious. No mask, no gloves, this and that. Then I see, the memes. If you're wearing a mask in your car, don't ever talk to me again. You're self-isolating from yourself. What do you?
Yeah.
It's unnecessary. So, and that's why, I've actually been quite confused the last week, because I'll listen to different conspiracy journalists, people with different takes, and all the entrepreneurial stuff that I listen to, the self-help stuff. Even those guys are interviewing, anyone that has, some kind of notoriety or history of it, and you have to, take everything with a grain of salt, obviously. And they try to be as objective as possible.
Tough. It's tough.
Right. So here's some information that I gathered, and then I want your opinion on it, and then let's revisit, should we go back or should we?
Yes, okay.
So big one for me, I truly enjoy Patrick Bet-David's value-tainment channel, and he interviews former General Brigadier in the U.S. Air Force who who lived and studied in China for 2 years. He was a lead informant on Chinese activities, in particular the internet and 5G. We've talked about that. He came back on, and then he had an economist and a journalist. Her name is Danielle DiMartino Booth, and they discussed everything from the economy, printing money, the Treasury, the Fed, and how people have become indebted bigger than any time in history. And basically the question was, can quantitative easing be, like, can they keep it up? Can they keep bailing everybody out? Already $6 trillion got pumped in. I think there was like something like, was it 3 million, 6 million Americans were on unemployment. You know, it's just heading in like this crazy direction, obviously. So the question came up, is this an intentional plot by the Chinese? So this was interesting, and it concerns the trade agreement that happened late last year.
20 years? Well, I won't say 10 to 20 years because my crystal ball is not that good.
Okay.
But I would certainly say, if you're talking about the next 5 years or so, I would certainly think that was going to be the case, because everybody's of the opinion that the stock market's going to come roaring back and that the Fed's going to be able to save the day. I'm not so sure, which means that if I'm not so sure and we're going to need more stimulus, then gold is going to be more attractive as a factor of time.
Another crazy conspiracy theory I'll throw out, you see what you think about it. How much of this do you think it's coronavirus and, you know, whatever's going on with U.S. and China? How much of this do you think is China saying, you know what, screw you, U.S. You're playing this hardball with me. I'm going to come and bully you in a whole different way that you won't even pay attention to it. How much credibility do you give to that? 5%? 1%?
I'm not going to answer that question, but I am going to answer the question in a different way, because I'm Christian at heart and I like to think that nobody would want to kill people. I will say this much, and if you're listening, write it down. In late November, word had already gotten off of the mainland that there was a virus in Wuhan. On January the 15th, the U.S. trade bill was signed, phase 1. December the 15th. I had a whole month off, December the 15th. 6 weeks later, the trade truce was signed with an out clause, a very clever out clause that the Chinese made sure was in there, that said if there was any kind of act of God, pandemic, then they didn't have to make good on what they had committed to buy from the United States. Within days, they announced the first coronavirus. So did the Chinese know damn well that this thing was running around the world for 6 weeks before they shut down Wuhan? Yes, they did. Is that criminal? Yes, it is. Does it deserve to go in front of a world tribunal? Yes, it does. Because we know that it was the unfettered travel that made this thing a global phenomenon that was impossible to contain. 6 weeks they knew, but they wanted that out clause. And then they underreported what happened in Wuhan, which a toddler could tell you based on what happened in Italy, based on what's happened in Germany and in France, and now in the UK with Boris Johnson in the ICU. There's no way in a city the size of New York, 11 million people, that there were so few cases. It's impossible with similar density to New York. So the World Health Organization should be held accountable for not holding China accountable to providing good data.
I see your face. I'm like, oh my goodness.
That's
Have you heard anything like that in the mainstream media? And what are your thoughts?
I can't say that I've heard anything similar to that in mainstream media. No.
She works for the federal banks, Federal Reserve banks, and she comes with some credibility. It's not like this was Alex Jones or David Icke.
No, I think everything she said was fantastic. She had, I fully believed her when she's like, I'm not going to answer that question because I can tell she thinks ahead. Like, if I answer that question, then here's I get it. I get what she did there. Fantastic, and that made me a believer. Just the way she handled that, and I think what I don't agree with is like, yeah, okay, let's just assume everything she said was accurate, 100% bang on, and China knew. I don't. It's not. I don't think they can go in front of anybody and be held accountable. I honestly, I don't, because what they did was they go, okay, your superpower, America. How do we cripple you with open warfare?
Right.
Just because they, let's say what she says is accurate, and if they did it intentionally, because they outsmarted America, does that mean they should be punished?
I think the thing about it is it's tough to get all the assets of China. It's tough to put what's the word, embargo on China, because it's kind of like the relationships are too big.
Yeah.
But the question comes into play here. Let me just show this tweet. And you see, people are saying now that the World Health Organization is implicit in this, kind of like in cahoots with China and whomever.
Yeah.
The biggest, China certainly has been one of the biggest endorsers of the World Health Organization. Dr. Tedros, same thing. He's come with his controversy. He was alleged to have hid certain, I think it was cholera, not Ebola. It was a certain virus in Ethiopia, where he's from, or
right.
wherever he is from Africa, of hiding epidemics or epidemics before. So it's not without controversy. But even on January 14th, preliminary investigations conducted by the Chinese authorities have found no clear evidence of human-to-human transmission of the novel coronavirus. So that was even tweeted by the World Health Organization. Certainly, World Health Organization, they have doctors and they have to have accountability, and they can't give erroneous information.
Correct.
So, I mean, when you look back, and as I continue to take a look at additional information, the question in another interview was posed to an American Brigadier General Robert Spalding. Had a book written about the Chinese, basically the sleeping giant, how they come to secure their economic position in the world, and their mandate by 2025 to be a world power. The pageantry of 2008 Olympics to say we've arrived, where our GDP is growing, and they've led, along with South Korea, to lead the charge of the 5G, and they become really a surveillance state. So, without ranting, basically the question was posed to this Brigadier General: was it a pandemic or a plandemic? And a lot of people conspire, and they think, okay, was it man-made and was it unleashed intentionally? He doesn't think so. He thinks that it was an accident. Wuhan houses, I think it was a P4 or something. It's a designated highest level of like disease control, where they test viruses, coronaviruses, and zoonotic viruses. And they think that it got out by accident. But what the Chinese had decided was to, as opposed to alerting the rest of the country, other nations, and doing the responsible thing and giving everybody the alerts and the heads up and closing travel, they felt like they didn't want to be the only ones to have devastating economic consequence. And they felt like, okay, if this is spread and everybody feels it, it will be first in, first out, and we won't devastate our own economy, and if we're the only ones, and try to isolate it ourselves. So there's thoughts. I would like your thoughts on that too.
Well, I'm of the opinion that it was a plandemic, but I'm not. That doesn't surprise me, and I guess I can understand why. I think I view it like this. It comes down to the organization versus the organism. And
Mm.
incidentally, you have the World Health Organization
Uh-huh.
that in the word their interest is health of the organism, not the organization.
Right.
Economy, their interest is in the organization, not the organism. Organism being the human being, the individual.
Right.
We are the organisms within the organization. So you've got these competing factions, basically, that are codependent on each other because you can't have one without the other. But both of them run completely different, and you add in the element of a virus to an organism, to an organization, you're going to have different outcomes, right?
Yeah.
So what's interesting is echo, the word, economy, echo, it's a Greek word meaning like unit. So it's a bunch of parts put together, right? So the economy is a bunch of parts. And yeah, it's going to suffer because of the virus that's happening. The ecosystem is suffering because of the organisms that are within it. Like, we've spread this new virus, it's an accident, whatever. So the organisms are suffering, organizations are suffering, but at no point will they'll ever be sort of there's an equilibrium, but it's a constant state of flux. So any snapshot you look, anytime you look, it's going to look out of balance, but it's always in balance because they're codependent, if that makes sense.
Right.
So, bringing it back to, this scenario, this situation, yes, okay, China did this thing because they're, as an organization, in an economy, they're second fiddle to America. They're not number one, and somebody needs to be number one. That's just how it goes, right? There's a number 1, 2, 3, all the way down. So whoever's calling the shots now, China didn't like it. Whatever. It's not conducive to their organization, nor is it conducive to their organisms within that organization. So they got to do something, or it's just we have to take orders from number one. So it's like, yeah, I get it. Something needs to be done. What do you do? Do you declare war and do it the old-fashioned way and just go to war and then just fight it out, or do we do it another way that isn't so overt? Can we be subtle about what we're doing, about the constant flow and change of economies? Because America wasn't always on number one. It used to be England. England used to rule the world.
Yep.
It's just changing of the guards. That's just what happens. And so we happen to be in a time where technology allows a swift change. And it's the organisms aren't always up to speed on what the organization is doing, but always rest assured the goal of the organization is to be on top. The goal of the organism is for harmony and balance, not to be on top, just for balance. We want a nice homeostasis. That's it, because your body regulates its own temperature. That's just what happens. Without you having to do anything, that's what organisms are
naturally do.
Right. Okay. Unnaturally, the organization has to take measures to find its own balance and harmony, which manifests as horrible things that occur in the world. But you can't make an omelet without breaking a few eggs. Sad. I know, it's sad.
The rules are meant to be broken.
Was the better question, right?
Phrase idioms can we add here that apply?
Yeah.
Let me share this with you. Let's keep going.
Yes.
Okay. The Pod Father, No Agenda podcast, John C. Dvorak and Adam Curry. He's said to have started the first podcast. He was former host on MTV, and he hosts the No Agenda podcast with John C. Dvorak, his partner, and they deliver a lot of debunking and very objective coverage of mainstream media. And so this was interesting as they discussed. Some media will portray busy hospitals at full tilt, can't handle the workload, patients, new cases, etc., not prepared with enough PPE and ventilators. And of course, certainly that's the case like in New York City. But they discussed that in certain parts that have not been ravaged with coronavirus, there's hospitals that are actually furloughing staff. Where staff is experiencing layoffs like any other industry. And in addition to that, I think the second part of this will be alarming.
And this is happening everywhere. Hospitals are furloughing hundreds of employees.
We have notes from a number of producers saying that they're getting laid off at these hospitals, and and the hospitals themselves are losing money.
Yes, and they apparently early on found a way to combat that. And this is State Senator Scott Jensen, I think his name. He's also a medical doctor. He's in Minnesota. And he explains the reimbursement for hospitals based upon type of ailment people have as it pertains to COVID.
Let me just say this. If I admit a patient to the hospital and they're on Medicare and they have just routine pneumonia for a diagnosis, the hospital will get a lump sum payment called a DRG, and it'll be about $4,600. If I admit that same patient and I attach COVID-19 to the pneumonia diagnosis, then it goes from $4,600 to $13,000 for that admission, regardless of whether the patient's in a hospital for 3 days or 13 days. If during that hospitalization I put the patient on a ventilator for a period of time, then the payment goes from $13,000 to $39,000. Now that's a big payment.
So this is a little freaky, knowing that getting someone onto the ventilator pops up the reimbursement to $39K. And they're getting these ventilators, I don't know if anyone's paying for them at the moment. I'm sure maybe some of the federal stuff.
The ventilators were about $5,000, and they've jacked the price up. Many of these places that have canceled their contracts, and now they're selling the same ones for $15,000 because they could do the sales pitch. You've seen the Silicon Valley sales pitch for technology.
Yeah.
Look, you're going to pay $15,000 for this ventilator. It pays for itself with one person on the ventilator.
Right.
Wow.
COVID-19 patient goes on a ventilator, you get $39,000, 3 times as much. Nobody can tell me after 35 years in the world of medicine that sometimes those kinds of things impact on what we do. Some physicians really have
And that was the actual doctor there, Dr. Jensen. So he is, again, he's a governor or a member of government, and then also a medical doctor. So that was, like when it comes to news, at least if you have someone, a participating party, you know what I mean? Like it's coming from someone from the medical field. Not just a journalist from a questionable source, etc. So, what were your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, hospitals are a business. Health care is a business. For an organization, is a business. For the organism or the individual, it is just your health. You're concerned about your health. It's not a business. But for brick and mortar buildings, they got to make money, and I mean, if they're losing money, and there's a way to make that money, why would they not do that? Is, I guess, my question.
Yeah,
the way that it's set up is that it's a business to make somebody better. Doctors have to take their oath because the doctors' practices themselves need to they need to commit to the well-being of the patient care, right? But again, the organization itself is a business that needs to look out for that interest to continue to do what they're doing so that doctors can provide healing and that sort of thing. So if they are losing money and people aren't really concerned about that, before long, your hospitals are closing up, disappearing, your staff is overworked, you're losing staff, and then that impact will have a more severe impact on the people that actually need that health care. Right? So the system is going to crumble without any stimulus because of the way it's set up, because it's a business, because it needs a bailout, because it is a business. So why not?
Further to that, there's also reporting going on saying that supposing an individual goes to the hospital and does pass away, they have pre-existing conditions, but these doctors are being influenced to put on the death certificate coronavirus.
Yes.
And in addition to that, the official narrative, the narrative of the official story, as they say it, is that when you hear these reports, it's a tricky, you have to listen for it, but X amount of people perished today, died at such and such location. And what they'll say in the reports is these individuals were tested for coronavirus. You won't actually hear they died of coronavirus. And the train of thought attached to that is that by the time a second or third wave is completed, then the vaccine will be available. They will roll out the statistics again, because if you want to believe this theory that Bill Gates and his mandate to get everybody vaccinated, now they're getting doctors used to and accustomed to putting on the death certificates coronavirus because they want to pad the statistics. Perhaps maybe because these models, the numbers haven't been close to the models, or they want the numbers and they want to fabricate these amounts to influence and instill fear, so that people, without question, are going to get vaccinated when the time comes. And it's estimated that, or predicted that, it'll come after the second wave or so, second or third wave. I mean, again, this is going through down the black hole of information, and it just makes me question everything now. I don't know which sources to believe, but I'm feeding my mind with all the possibilities and keeping my mind open to them because, I just think I can't accept a single news source anymore.
No, you got to diversify. And I think the one thing that I guess sticks out in my mind is that when there is a cure or vaccine, the business doesn't actually make money off of that. They make money off of the sickness and the treatment, right? So you got to hook up to the ventilator.
Oh yeah.
Well, they got all these. Right. Yeah, they got the treatment is where they make the money. So the vaccine isn't. So
no, because it ends. There's a finality to it.
Exactly. So knowing that, let's say Bill Gates is behind trying to vaccinate everybody.
Right.
The conspiracy theorist should remember that if he's going after a vaccine, it's not to make money. That wouldn't be the intention. I'm not going to guess at what the intention is for the vaccine, but that's.
Well, they say that they're going to have tracking systems, and then we've also talked before that they're going to incorporate apps that track your location and will identify, okay, once this person has declared that they had the coronavirus, we can track back that person's where they've been traveling, and if it was anywhere near the vicinity of you, were you next to it, were you in the general area, and then they will give you alerts that you should go test it. So that's what the vaccine is not just about ending the pandemic. They say that it's going to be coupled up with tracking devices as well.
Yes, I think under the guise of, you're right, fear, right? Fear and safety, you're more inclined to say, okay, sure, I'll do the vaccine if it's going to keep me safe.
Yep. There was some rumblings too that, I mean, if you consider, Lombardy is infamous, notorious for having highly polluted city, very much like Wuhan. And so they were saying that they are more susceptible to respiratory illness anyways. And now they're saying that a lot of the death certificates are being edited to include coronavirus now too. So that was just another thought that came up. So it depends on what you want to believe. But
the other thing that comes to mind is like how I'm trying to think of how a hospital would actually go about making money to stay open to help people get well, because they depend on the budgets that governments make. They depend on the fundraising. Every year you see this hospital, Princess Margaret lotteries, that sort of thing.
Oh, right. Yeah.
We are in need of money, but people typically don't think about that until they have an illness, right?
Until they utilize it, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Until I need that service. Like, why am I really even thinking about donating to the hospital? They got, here we got free healthcare, so it's like, well, why would a hospital need money? But yeah, they need money. They got to pay their staff. They got to run the business. It's like, well, how else would you make that business profitable without sacrificing healthcare? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
When you start cutting back on healthcare, then that's another serious problem. So, I see this as that sort of easy way for them to partake and get the money they need to ultimately help others. Because it's not like really what are hospitals spending this money on? Not a big flashy, I want to stay at this hospital because it's none of that. It's just we need these machines, we need this research, we need to do all this stuff that nobody really thinks about. So, hey, this pandemic's coming along. All we need to do to get money from the insurance, not from patients that need help, but from the insurance that we're paying out to get some of that money back. All we need to do is start saying, yeah, COVID. I get it.
Yeah. So the other thing earlier this week was President Trump was saying stuff about Clorox. But what was interesting about within that same press conference, as he was discussing with the doctors about testing, was exposure to UV lighting.
Yeah.
And I want to show you something super interesting shared by one of our faithful listeners. I'm not going to divulge the identity. This person wishes to remain anonymous.
Thank you for listening.
Absolutely.
Thank you for listening.
Thank you. And I want to share this because this was me, and it's with respect to not Clorox and bleaching and drinking bleach, etc. Because certainly there was crazy enough individuals that there was a wife who gave it to her husband, and they were using cleaners that were used typically for aquariums. I don't know if you recall that was in Arizona. The two ended up dying because of it. But this is the impact of UVC rays, and very you cannot. You should not let it touch your skin. It's not something you can look at directly. Your lotions and things like that, moisturizers and tanning lotions and sprays, they protect from UVA, UVB. The sun also remits a UVC ray that is very resourceful and effective in killing certain things, including viruses. But because of our ozone layer, it doesn't penetrate the earth in the same way. So, but these ones, they can be made and manufactured through lighting, bulbs, etc. So I want you to watch this. It's a really cool video covering UVC rays and different modalities of cleaning now.
Interesting.
With coronavirus sweeping the globe, demand for virus-killing ultraviolet light machines is increasing.
Right now, we're offering all the units that we have at no cost because we understand the magnitude of this situation and we want to do whatever we can to help.
One of the key places these ultraviolet light machines are being put to work is airplanes. With people packed tight and lots of high-touch surfaces, planes are just as much a form of transportation for germs as they are for us. That's where the Germ Falcon comes in.
Germ Falcon is designed specifically for the interior of an airplane. It's built in the footprint of a flight attendant's food and drink cart, and it has these wings that reach out over the seats and under the overhead bins, and it's lined with these ultraviolet UVC lights. And they're strategically positioned to deliver high doses of these UVC lights to all the commonly touched surfaces on an airplane.
If you're wondering how light can kill viruses, consider how the sun's rays burn our skin, especially mine. You've probably seen sunglasses or sunscreen advertising protection from both UVA and UVB light. The sun also emits a higher energy UVC light, like the kind created by the Germ Falcon, but it doesn't penetrate the Earth's atmosphere, meaning Earth germs haven't had any reason to develop immunity to it.
UVC light's been used in hospitals for a long time, and it is very reliable and very fast to kill all known pathogens, bacteria, viruses, and superbugs is what it's typically used for in hospitals. On airplanes, we're really concerned with viruses like coronavirus, Ebola, influenza, and norovirus are the big ones.
UVC isn't the only method of disinfecting a plane, but it does have some significant advantages over the chemical disinfectants we usually use.
Chemical disinfectants are highly flammable. They tend to remove the flame retardant coatings on airplane surfaces that are required by law. And most of the time, if you look at the chemical disinfectants you have at home, if you read the fine print, they're only to be used in well-ventilated areas, which is not the interior of an airplane. They're only supposed to be used on hard, non-porous surfaces, which is probably 60% of the airplane cabin, but the other 40% is leathers and fabrics. To sanitize one of these surfaces, which is to kill bacteria, you need to leave the surface visibly wet for 10 seconds and then wipe it dry. To kill viruses, to disinfect, you need to keep the surface visibly wet for up to 4 minutes, and they're not doing that on airplanes.
This ultraviolet germ-killing technology is also being put to use in another critical battlefield in the fight against disease-causing microbes: hospitals. A company called UVD Robots has been deploying ultraviolet disinfecting robots to hospitals around the globe since 2018. It claims to offer the only autonomous battery-powered ultraviolet robots currently available. These UV disinfecting robots have been deployed in about 50 countries so far. They're not fully active in the United States yet, but they are being tested in Florida. Dimer, the company behind the Germ Falcon, also has a unit made for hospitals called the UV Hammer.
A great option in operating rooms, patient rooms.
Yeah, so neat. Definitely amazing technology put to use here.
Innovative. It's very innovative.
Right?
Interesting.
That was pretty cool.
All I see is like, okay, so in like 5 years from now, when those things get smaller, because that's, everything
right,
it's smaller, phones, well, whatever,
portable, hands-free.
Yeah, exactly, hands-free.
Important things, yeah. Compact, easy to store.
The house unit, like somebody's going to be like, oh, can I put that for my house? And it's going to be interesting.
Our faithful listener in particular actually is using the bulbs created like a storage unit or like a closet, and then like will disinfect groceries and clothing and stuff like that when they enter and re-enter leave and re-enter the home.
Wow.
So it's an effective, but it can be very dangerous. So, obviously children cannot be close to it, and you can get a welder's burn, and you shouldn't be looking directly at it. Even when the light source is off, they say like you shouldn't be looking at it. So you have to have protective eyewear and so on. So,
wow,
interesting though, because like the gentleman was saying that owned the company there, that these viruses, superbugs, etc., have not developed an immunity to the UVC rays because they don't reach the Earth because of the ozone. So it's amazing that that was discovered, that UVC, number one, can be manufactured, created through bulbs and what have you, and the fact that studies have been done to show that it can be clean. But it's such a paradigm of a shift of thought, right? Because you're so used to use some kind of soapy water, something wet, wipe down the surface, let it dry. That kind of like you just shine a light on something. you have to have that ultimate belief that it's going to work, because it's like it can look the same before and after the surface or the clothing or whatever. So you have to trust that the UVC lights are doing
whatever's going on,
what they're intended to do. So I found that super interesting.
It's fascinating. I didn't know that we were at that level. We're just cleaning things with light now.
Can you imagine that? Like, if only it were that easy at home, right? With kids.
That's what I mean. Like,
kind of light, and it gets the toys off the floor.
Exactly. You know, I think the first place you'd see those are like the peep shows.
They remind you of CSI. The whole room lights up, right? Hotel rooms.
The hotel rooms is like,
I'm never traveling again. Forget COVID-19. I just needed CSI in the blue light. Right? Like the remote control, the taps of the sink, the hair dryer, even like the guardrail, the bar in the shower. Like, you just don't think of all the things that are being touched.
Yeah.
That's why I so appreciate when a bathroom, like, when it has no doors now, like in an airport.
Yes.
And it's like touchless soap, touchless water.
How do you feel about those
toilets are censored, urinals are censored.
Dyson hand dryers but
they're too close though. Eh?
I know, they're too close.
Damn. I gotta wash my hands again.
They're too close. I love the idea, but they're too close.
And then I hate the paper towel dispensers, because they only give you like, not enough. So I'm ridiculous if I use paper towels to dry my hands. Like, I'll use like rolls of like 3 or 4 tugs. Like, what do you do? You want a towel? Like, because I hate that. Like, hand dryers, whatever those Dyson ones or the air dryers. You always wipe your hands on your pants anyway.
It's true.
Oh,
it's true.
Man.
What do you do at the back, though? At the back, right? Back of the knee. Nobody looks there.
Good spot, yeah. Right back of that's a good one. I think you have like these handprints on like your pockets in the front.
Yep, they go, he went to the bathroom. I see.
When I was playing sports, when I played basketball, and my coach gave this amazing advice, and I never forgot it. It's like, if you wanted to wipe the sweat off your forehead into your hands, you need to get rid of it. Where's the one place that doesn't sweat? What kind of clothing what article of clothing are you wearing where you could wipe and it won't be sweaty? It's your socks, because your feet don't. Well, I mean, they sweat in your shoe, but like, if your sock, provided you have not an ankle sock, it's a good place to wipe. It's always going to be dry. So there you go.
I just learned something.
You'll see me pretend to tie my shoe, but I'm really drying my hands on my socks after I go.
That's amazing. I like that.
Man. Herd immunity. Thoughts on that? Sweden. They weren't completely happy. They still had a number of deaths, which will always be questioned. If they implemented more self-isolation and lockdown measures, would they not have experienced as many deaths? But it's sounding like they're going to exit having. They'll still see the decline, but they say that the benefits are, as far as mental health, people have maintained a certain lifestyle, and they're obviously they're going to gauge how well the economy will rebound because of it. Thoughts there: herd immunity and not employing self-isolation and lockdown.
I would lean towards that, to be honest. I think their stance on putting mental health first is sort of the way to go. I put it like this, in entrepreneurship and business, if you want to be successful, you have to get the mindset of success first. why would that not translate over to healthcare? If you wanted to be healthy, well, why would you not get that mindset of health first, right? So if mental health is like, yeah, no, we want your quality of life to be more important than what's happening right now because it's going to pass, that I think you will see a lot more healthy people, people making healthier choices, and it just all trends towards improvements not only in mental health, but also physical health, and then by extension, the organization of which those organisms are a part of, right? So they get it. If we are a unit and the organisms are healthy, by default, the organization must be healthy too. So
fair enough. Yeah. And that leads us just back to our beginning question, and this is how we'll round it off. I mean, do you feel like it's time to return back to some kind of normalcy with or without? Maybe that's a question. With or without limitations. Still, certainly, the United States has started to roll out different things. Like they will return back. States will return back, but with limitations. I understand there's a couple provinces here. I believe Nova Scotia. Quite possibly, was it Alberta? Saskatchewan, I think, going to roll back out with limitations. Do you feel like Ontario is ready to do the same thing?
I don't know. It's tough to say. It's tough to say only because I don't. If we're copying Sweden and again doing a big push for mental health, then maybe. But if not, then it's tough to say. Because coming out of it, if we're saying, well, economy is more important, that's essentially saying the organization is more important than individual health, right? So it's kind of like, tough to say.
I think that's going to happen irrespective. There's always going to be the case that, people are going to fight for business over bodies and lives, right? When we go back. Because to some communities, whomever, belief systems, etc., they're going to believe that we should stay like this for good.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, some people are thriving under this regime of isolation.
But then there's those who are, I'll say it, overly cautious, maybe overprotective and scared.
Yeah.
Like at some point, I do think we have to go back, right? I think there are people that make the case to stay like this in perpetuity. And I'm like, society can't function like that. I just don't like.
People can't.
Certainly, things can change, but I think we need to go back.
So, yeah, absolutely.
It's crazy.
So, my question to you about this: when was a turning point for you that you're like, okay, gotta go back now?
I went through the 5 stages of loss, certainly, and like you said, they don't have to happen in the same order necessarily. Yeah. They can jump back and forth. So I think there was a lot of anger for a while. Then even denial, which is usually the first one, like even as of late, like, because I question whether it was real or not, but it's certainly real. Obviously, the coronavirus is real. But then you try to reason like, okay, was this intentional? Now I don't believe that it was intentional. Like I said earlier, I think China identified that, we did this, the coronavirus occurred there. They didn't do their part. And I think they were implicit in allowing it to spread. I mean, there's 5 million residents of Wuhan that were able to travel all across the globe or wherever, disperse long before it was even announced to the World Health Organization and internationally. So therefore, limited data and information didn't allow countries, continents, travel systems to respond and to take action quickly enough. So all this information that was lacking, is there's a long period of time of information gathering, and whether we say countries acted soon enough, I mean, the reality is you work with as much information as you have.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's hard to justify to a population if there's so few cases where you are to create a lockdown situation when it hasn't necessarily impacted, and you don't know if it's going to impact your community in a large scale. So how do you address that? Do you create a lockdown like if there's only 10 cases in the whole country? Like it is a very difficult, and I certainly don't wish to be in a position to do that. There's obviously people that are wanting and more qualified to do that, but it's a very difficult situation. I think leaders of countries, they're going to get criticized. It's a tough time. They're going to get criticized no matter what they do.
Yeah, absolutely. Everybody's watching, right?
Yeah.
And to be told, okay, what's next? What's going to happen next? So
right. You can't. There's no perfect response that's going to satisfy everybody.
No.
So you know, I've gone through the denial, gone through the acceptance, gone through the bargaining. Okay, what can I do? But I guess maybe the last week and a half, probably I've just been like, okay. I mean, maybe, you know, when they were saying this was the critical week, I think it was like the middle of April, almost 2 weeks ago, and they're like, this week and the following week is when we're supposed to see the explosion. A high jump, an exponential jump in numbers. And I think when we didn't see that, like I still know that we can go back, but I would still be cautious and maybe not necessarily start running out the door because we still anticipate, I suspect there's going to be a second and maybe a third wave. And those are probably going to be worse.
Yeah.
Because as soon as you let everybody go back, and if you, even with restraints, like it's like, that's when it'll resurface.
Yeah, I mean it's also tough because you've got this very interesting financial situation that most people have now found themselves in across, you know, the entire world. This stuff is really, you know, unprecedented on how to handle. And again, this is that awkward time where a few people that people have been relying on need to make these big decisions that are going to impact everybody and everything, right? We're just entering this new era. And so on one side of the coin, there's this distrust of those people that could be responsible for the very thing that is impacting your life. And the other side, it's like, well, I need to do what you say. So it's this never ending coin toss of like, today, what side is it going to land on? Okay, today, I like what I'm hearing. Okay, we're moving back. All right, we're looking ahead. You know, next day, okay, I'm seeing things like, okay, this is all just to manipulate me. Why are we all going through this? What's really happening, right?
What's the truth?
It sucks. It sucks, right?
Yeah. That's the tough thing, is that because I look for it. Like I said, if you look for something, you'll usually find it. I look for more than just, you know, the official story. So look to multiple sources, look to multiple mediums, and then you hear different versions of what's going on, and you're like, okay, this could be true, and you try to piece it together, and then you just like analytically think and come up with your own conclusions. So I think it, like anything, it's like I love that when we went from pandemic to pandemic to organization versus organism. I love that, and that's going to be the title of this episode.
That phrase. It's just helping. It helps me to put this in perspective because there's so much news out there, and I'm like, okay,
right.
And things function in their own way, and I might not know the system entirely, but if I can go general and go, okay, this is an organization, this is an organism, a living thing, and these are how these things typically function, and they're codependent. They need each other to exist.
Yes.
So there's going to be friction. There's always going to be friction.
Right. Well, I mean, I don't know. Can you say it is what it is? Like and we shall see. I mean, you know, the underlying thing, no matter what, and if you're talking doom and gloom or pie in the sky. The reality is we have to maintain positivity and hope. The hope is always there, because if you
Absolutely.
default your hope, then like,
You're good.
yeah, you always have to be hopeful, and times will change, and time will pass, and hopefully we're ahead of it eventually. I just can't see society staying this way permanently. Though it's alarming to me to think that some people think it will be. That's where hope comes in. So that's where I have to shut off. Like, okay, that's enough of hearing this and this and this, and I have to employ, that survival mode. Right? This is what we're all doing. And
Yeah.
the tough thing is, like, survival mode for different societies is like different. Like here, we're not. Are you really worried about food running out? But you hear Tyson Foods. You hear a couple places in Alberta. I guess they call them slaughterhouses, meat packing warehouses, wholesalers. They're having contaminated meats, and I think animals with coronavirus.
Wow.
So there's this reports to brace yourself, and there's going to be a shortage of meat protein and so on. So I'm like, well, I've dabbled in vegetarian and eating.
I like to dabble in vegetarianism.
Well, I think we talked about this when we first started. Like, I was doing a lot more.
Yeah.
Certainly, we've had more home cooked meals and needed more variety and cook with more protein now. But I'm not opposed to that. I'd be fine. Like, if there was a shortage of protein, I think I'd be okay versus the way I used to be. And I know how many people are, like, they can't go without their meat and potatoes, right? Like, if that's the case, so be it. I'm not that concerned about it, but I hear people like, okay, like the, not phenomenon, but the culture of having like a chest freezer or a stand-up freezer in your basement, and like our parents are stockpiling meat. I'm like, that's what the grocery store's for. Go another trip. Let them refrigerate it. I'm like, I'm not giving you my money. Like, I'll leave my money in a safe, like in an investment or a bank account. I'm not invested in like meat. I'm like, yeah, what like this stuff goes on sale. But back then, maybe there was 3 grocers, and now there's like grocers in this neighborhood. You can get food everywhere, and
there's no shortage of food. Everybody is eating something.
Yeah, so I'm not that threatened. Maybe a couple years ago, I'd be quite threatened about the prospect of not being able to have a steak. But
listen, I don't want to live in a world where I can't have the option to have steak.
Yeah, option. That's all I want. I just want the option.
I want the option of, like, I can go for a nice steak. That's good.
Just season a piece of tofu like steak. There you go.
I love that agodashi and tofu.
Yes. Hey, it is what it is. That's what
it is. It is what it is.
That's it. Organization or organism. There it is.
There it is.
Title, phrase coined by my lovely co-host, the elegant, the highly intelligent, the mensch of a man. Like, what more can I say? My partner, Christopher Bernard. And wow. Thanks, buddy.
Listen, Mr. Quinto, it has been an honor and a pleasure to have this conversation with you. You have opened up my eyes to some. Honestly, that's why I love this engaging dialogue. And you are. I always say this: you're the nicest man in the world. But beyond that, you are one of the most incredible human beings on the planet. You care.
Oh God! Stop.
You are just listen, dude, and you can see it in your work. Like, you can see it not in just what you do professionally, but what you do recreationally. Like, you are just a genuine soul. Thank you.
The approach is the same for both, and I hope that's what everybody gets from this. Is like, it's okay, generosity and caring and community. That's what it's all about, and I so enjoy it because of that, and hence that's why we do it, and that's why we keep doing it, and hopefully that's why you guys keep engaging and watching and listening. So
thank you for doing so.
Not without purpose. Yeah, like, I hope we're touching somebody's lives, and enriching someone's life and instilling hope, especially in a time like this. This would have been the theme and the conversation we would have had, irrespective pandemic or not.
Absolutely.
So that's been the spirit of this project. So hopefully through social and YouTube, iTunes, and anywhere else you listen, we're reaching you. And give us your feedback. Follow my dear friend Chris at CK Bernard and at The Alchemic Way. And subscribe, like, send us your comments. Thank you.
Good night, everybody.
All right. Okay, there's a good silent pause.
I don't think. Are we still here?
No, let's end it off with a nice sign off. Podcast and Chill, the podcast you never heard of until now. I salute you. Love you guys. Thank you very much. Have a good night. Thank you for joining us. Until next time, take care.